When did white men become victims? White men actually think they losing the country. To who? It ain't us. When's the last time you got on a black cruise ship? Or flew on a black airline? Get the fuck out of here. We don't got no money. We got some vodkas and a couple of record companies. White men actually think they losing the country. Did you see the Capitol riots? White men trying to overthrow the government that they run.
Stand up. Yeah, that is the great Chris Rock from his 2023 stand-up special, Selective Outrage. I am Pete Dominic, coming at you a little late because last night I hosted our hangout till about 11 o'clock. I'm thinking about bringing it back down to one night a week of hangouts, Thursday nights. It's a lot. And here I am late again. I don't know. I might have to go week by week. We'll see. I appreciate your support very, very much. I love to see you and love nothing more than hanging out. But it can be a lot. It can be stressful. Last night, a lot of people there, almost 70 people or 60 people. I forget exactly, but it was a great turnout, and I was so happy to see you. A lot on everybody's mind, as always, given the nature of what the hell is happening in our nation and in our world and your world. I hope that you are not suffering too much. I hope you're finding joy. I hope you're enjoying the weather at the least. Hope you're getting outside. Took me all day to get outside yesterday. I was pretty stressed out by the time I got out there and felt much better after taking a long walk in the park. Highly recommend that if you haven't done it. All right. Well, I've got the great Celeste Headlee joining me. I'm very excited to have her here today. She is excellent as always. And that is coming up at 28 minutes. But first, I've got a whole bunch of clips and your headlines. So let's get after that right now. And I can't do any of it without your support. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. This show is ad-free. But I do have to plug how it is fueled, how I am supported, and that is with your subscription, your paid subscription. Now, everybody has a podcast or a Substack, and everybody wants to get paid, wants to be a content creator, and so it's hard to choose and decide. I'm so happy that you have stayed with me over the years, or if you've just signed up, welcome aboard. Regardless, very, very honored and happy to have you, and of course, happy to have your paid subscriptions. As little as $5, you can pay more if you want. Get the Discord platform and our Hangouts and so much more. So sign up now and let's get to the headlines. Yeah. Well, yesterday, our amazing Vice President, J.D. Vance, invited the cameras into his official White House office to host an episode of the now deceased Charlie Kirk's podcast. He said he was guest hosting the show in honor of Charlie Kirk. And, of course, then he went on to have some of the worst people join him on the show, including Stephen Miller, who said they're going to come after all the left-wing organizations. Of course, J.D. Vance and all the rest are saying that this guy was inspired by leftist ideology. The Attorney General is saying it. The President is saying it. Doesn't matter what the truth is. Doesn't matter if it's complicated. It doesn't matter. That doesn't fit with the strategy and the narrative that they need so that they can continue taking over and destroying institutions. Stephen Miller vowing vengeance to dismantle these terrorist networks, whatever that means. They've been calling the entire Democratic Party a terrorist organization. So we're really in a bad place at the moment as a result of Charlie Kirk's death. It's a question of what more power are they going to take? How are they going to punish people that had nothing to do with it? It should be mentioned that like every single elected Democrat expressed sympathies for Charlie Kirk's death. Nobody should be killed. Nobody should die that way. We should not have political assassination in this country. You should be able to say what you want and not have to worry about it. They said it every which way. And then came all the caveats. Of course, because he was a terrible person. but now they are using this, obviously, and so we're going to have to go day to day here and talk to each other and communicate to each other and try to understand and fight back wherever we can. Most importantly, support each other, one another, build community, have a favor dinner, as Maura mentioned. There's so much that you can do for others to serve, to find purpose, and to fight back. So do it. Let's do it together. U.S. officials said yesterday China agreed to a TikTok sale. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said U.S. and China agreed to a framework for an agreement. So it's just a framework. When they do that, then, we'll see. Will they have a framework? Bessent said President Trump would talk on Friday with the Chinese leader to finalize the deal. All right. Scott Bessent, who has tried to fist fight like several other people in the administration. Fun. Anyway, Trump has set a deadline this Wednesday, not in 2 weeks, this Wednesday, to enforce or delay a law requiring the video app to be separated from its Chinese owner or face a ban in the U.S. A bipartisan majority of Congress had passed the ban because of concerns TikTok's ties to China made it a national security threat, but Trump has, of course, delayed this enforcement for months. He thinks he needs TikTok, or else he wouldn't be doing this. He's not worried about the Chinese threat. He thinks he needs it to get his message out, to gain support for his insidious, everyday bowel movements upon us. In a related story, China said NVIDIA has violated its antitrust law, the latest sign of tension now between China and Washington. So that'll be a fun meeting between Trump and Xi. That'll be I'm sure a lot will get done. Also, our Mad King said that we struck another Venezuelan boat. He announced yesterday the U.S. had struck a boat he said was carrying drugs. It was the second time this month he's ordered the use of lethal force against a vessel from Venezuela. He said 3 narco-terrorists had been killed in the latest strike. Hours earlier, Venezuela's leader condemned the earlier strike, which killed 11 people on September 2nd as a heinous crime. So escalating the stakes with Venezuela here. How do we know that they are narco-terrorists? These are considered illegal killings, like the drone killings that Obama ordered by people like Rand Paul and other international legal organizations and experts. Extrajudicious killings, what do they call them? But apparently you can do that now. And nobody seems to be getting too outraged by it because there's so much other stuff. Like yesterday, the New York Times had a huge story of a major scandal. I mean, a scandal beyond any scandal we've ever seen any other administration, but it happens so often that you don't seem to notice it. But apparently the Trump family, his inner circle, the Witkoffs, made a deal with the United Arab Emirates. So what did they get? Well, they got the sale of valuable computer chips to the United Arab Emirates, and the Trumps and Witkoffs got a $2 billion crypto deal that would financially benefit the family. It's unbelievable, or very believable, because that's why they're there. But they've made more money in the first however many months they've been in office, 9 months, 8 months, than they did their entire family's career of real estate and other bullshit products that they've been selling to schmucks all over the world. So it's unfathomable what they're doing. But they're doing it. Moving on, in the Mideast, during a visit to Israel, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's also a hollow man, cast doubt on the chances of negotiating the surrender of Hamas. And so those talks seem to be going great. In Sudan, the worst battleground in the country's civil war, El Fasher, it's called, children are eating cattle feed as paramilitaries try to starve 260,000 people into submission. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Whew. All right. I mean, I can't move on from that, but the next headline has to do with James Comey's daughter, Maureen Comey. She was a longtime federal prosecutor in Manhattan, and she was fired by Trump because she was the prosecutor who oversaw Ghislaine Maxwell, and he needed to get rid of her so he could send in his guy and then make a deal with her so she wouldn't talk. So that's why Maureen Comey got fired, and of course now she is suing the Trump over her firing. So we'll see what happens there. There's some very interesting, good reporting coming out regarding those firings, or rather the arrests, I should say, at the Kia plant, the South Korean car manufacturing plant that happened in Alabama, Georgia. The detention of more than 300 workers following a raid by immigration authorities at a Hyundai plant in Georgia has stunned South Korea. They're probing for human rights abuses in this U.S. raid, as our president is insisting foreign workers, of course, are welcome. But there's now a lot more reporting out about this, and South Korea is very mad and very concerned about what happened in Georgia with the South Korean nationals. And President Trump, of course, always sending mixed messages on this and everything else. Sure, send all your workers, and then we'll arrest them. How about that? More news on the Epstein scandal. Jeffrey Epstein's estate has turned over additional documents to the House Oversight Committee, including a previously redacted name from the late sex offender's now notorious 50th birthday book. According to a letter that NBC News got, the name that was unredacted was not immediately publicly released, or else I'd be saying it, obviously. But we'll see who that is. Who do you think it was? Please let it be RFK Jr. I can't believe I'm rooting for certain people to be unveiled, unmasked, that were pedophiles. I guess that's the right thing to do, but it just seems like a weird thing to be rooting for. The U.S. Department of Education apparently has pulled funding for programs in 8 states aimed at supporting students who have both hearing and vision loss. Cucks, DEIs. A move that could affect some of the country's most vulnerable students. The programs are considered vital in those states, but represent only a little over $1 million a year in federal money. So why are they doing that? Why are they possibly punishing young people with hearing or vision loss? There are about 10,000 children and young adults from infants to 21-year-olds who are deafblind, and more than 1,000 in the 8 affected states, according to the National Center on Deafblindness. Programs targeted by the Education Department of Wisconsin, Oregon, Washington, as well as New England, which is served by a consortium for Massachusetts, Maine, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Vermont. So how low can you go is the question. Pretty low every day. It is hard to watch and manage. Those are the headlines that I've gathered for you from yesterday. Let me know what I missed, and I will be happy to mention it if it fits, if it's appropriate, if it's relevant, for sure. And you can't get a more comprehensive news headlines and rundown and clip show than you do here. And so, speaking of which, let's get to those clips right now. Well, I rarely do this, but I thought it was pretty important yesterday, this sit-down that J.D. Vance had with others in the administration while hosting Charlie Kirk's radio show, which someone you mentioned last night. I think it was Kevin Richburg. If Kamala Harris hosted some podcast or radio show from her official government office, the right would be apoplectic. That is a violation of the Hatch Act and an ethics violation, et cetera. But, of course, nobody made a peep, but a good point made by Kevin last night. A lot of good points at the Hangout last night. Anyway, Stephen Miller on with J.D. Vance. I'm going to play it. I'm sorry, but I think it's important, and then we'll get reactions.
What emotions I'm feeling right now, this is something people say. I mean, you kind of know the answer. There's incredible sadness, but there's incredible anger. And the thing about anger is that unfocused anger or blind rage is not a productive emotion.
Right.
But focused anger, righteous anger, directed for a just cause is one of the most important agents of change in human history.
Charlie showed that. Amen.
And we are going to channel all of the anger that we have over the organized campaign that led to this assassination to uproot and dismantle these terrorist networks. So let me explain a little bit what that means. So,
I've got 30 seconds, so be quick, Stephen.
The organized doxing campaigns, the organized riots, the organized street violence, the organized campaigns of dehumanization, vilification, posting people's addresses, combining that with messaging that's designed to trigger and incite violence, and the actual organized cells that carry out and facilitate the violence, it is a vast domestic terror movement. And with God as my witness, we are going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people. It will happen, and we will do it in Charlie's name.
Thank you, Stephen. Don't go away. I'll be joined.
All right. Not for nothing, but his mix minus is off. That's an audio term, but that's why you're hearing that little echo. The audio engineer for Charlie Kirk and J.D. Vance, he didn't know what he was doing. He screwed it up. How about that? Used to happen at Sirius sometimes. Okay, well, now I've got some better clips for you. Speaking of which, this is Jamel Bouie's columnist, New York Times, real smart guy who I have been reading and interviewed a long time ago, but I love him on Substack as well. He's really good. Here it is.
I'm far from the first person to point this out, obviously, but isn't it just incredibly ironic that the same group of people who are insisting that Charlie Kirk is a martyr for free speech, someone to be emulated, someone to be respected, again, for their commitment to free speech, these same people are currently leading one of the most, I have to say, insane cancellation campaigns I've ever witnessed. Hounding and firing people, not for even insulting Kirk, although that's fine, but for simply repeating his words, for simply noting the things that he said of his own accord on his platforms, that he advocated for, that he called for, that he made the basis of his public persona. The Washington Post, in fact, just fired Karen Attiah, one of their columnists, for the offense of just posting Kirk's own words on social media. It appears, right, that if you try to honor Kirk's legacy by speaking freely about Charlie Kirk, you are liable to be suspended or fired or disciplined in one way, shape, or form or another. And the only way to avoid this is to shut up and praise Kirk in accordance with what appears to be the official state position on the Charlie Kirk death. You will praise him for his commitment to free speech, or else. Or else. It's absurd, and it's an indication of how so many self-proclaimed free speech warriors did not and do not care about free speech in and of itself. What they care about is their ability to speak freely. That's what free speech means to these people. They speak, you listen. And if you don't listen, then they'll make sure that you do.
Yeah, Jamel Bouie out on a walk. You hear the dog behind him there. I thought that was really good and wanted to share that. He makes a lot of good points there. Here now, I want to play this clip. This is from Meet the Press on Sunday. This is former FBI Special Agent Chris O'Leary holding back nothing in his criticism of Kash Patel.
Director Patel has some excellent qualifications on social media. He has absolutely no background experience or disposition or character to be in charge of the FBI. This is an embarrassment. People throughout my career have asked, excuse me, what is the biggest threat to U.S. national security? What keeps you up at night? And that has vacillated over time. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, drones, cyber warfare. The biggest threat to U.S. national security is having incompetent sycophants in charge of protecting our citizens. And that's what played out over the last week. And not to minimize this event. Political assassination against somebody utilizing or employing their First Amendment protected rights should disgust all of us. But in the scheme of things, this was a minor crisis. If this continues down this pathway and we have an Oklahoma City bombing or, God forbid, something on the scale of a 9/11, Kash Patel couldn't lead an organization during this crisis. If we have something at scale, we're in real trouble. And he decided to stay for the second course at Rayos, apparently, which I've been there. The meatball is spectacular. But it shows that he lacks the character and the judgment to handle this.
Yeah, there you go. Wow. Chris O'Leary and a lot more law enforcement types, former FBI, criticizing Kash Patel. It's scary to think that he's in charge of any investigation of anything ever. All right, now this was a pretty upsetting moment yesterday in the Oval Office when a reporter asked Trump about Minnesota's Melissa Hortman and her assassin, and he had no idea who she was. Of course, he commented at the time about her and said he wasn't going to call the governor because what sense would it make? But in this clip, he says, well, if the governor had asked me. He's such a piece of shit, and he is on display as that POS right here.
Mr. President, I want Charlie Kirk, in retrospect, given all of the moving ways that this White House
has paid tribute to Charlie Kirk.
Right.
Do you think it would have been fitting to lower the flags to half-staff when Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota House Speaker, was gunned down by an assassin as well?
I'm not familiar. The
Minnesota House Speaker, a Democrat, who was assassinated this summer.
Well, if the governor had asked me to do that, I would have done that. But the governor of Minnesota didn't ask me. I didn't. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I would have if somebody had asked me. People make requests for the lowering of flag, and oftentimes you have to say no because it would be a lot of lowering. The flag would never be up. Had the governor of Minnesota asked me to do that, I would have done that gladly.
All right. No, he wouldn't have. Well, ask him now. How about you call him now, Tim Walz, and see if he's a man of his word. Well, we know he's not. Ever. Never has been. Okay, well, now here is Congressman Jim Himes. He was on television yesterday on, I think, MSNBC, and I like this clip, so I wanted to grab it.
Let me ask you about the moment as well, the Charlie Kirk stuff. Do you feel safe right now? What would it take for you to feel safe if you don't?
You know, when you go into this job, you assume the risk that is pretty horrible. And I know we're having a long conversation about security and should we have $15,000 or $20,000. You know what we should do? We should shut the hell up and be solemn and dignified in the face of a tragedy, right? I got to tell you, one of my worst moments in my, decade and a half in Congress was that day that Charlie Kirk was killed. And some of the Republican members, well known now, decided that they would seize that moment without a fact in the world, not to be solemn, not to urge calm, not to remind us of the angels of our better nature, but to say, you did this to the Democrats. It's your fault. By the way, this is the message coming out of the Oval Office. This is both a way to get more violence and less safety, and also the hallmark of somebody who has no business in a position of leadership. A leader takes a deep breath. A leader sort of waits for the facts to come out. And regardless of what those facts are, a leader says, we don't do violence in this country. We resolve our disagreements peacefully and in a democratic fashion. And by the way, the American people should look at their own congressmen, should look at their own governors. I'm going to call out Spencer Cox of Utah, who's been doing a beautiful job in trying to take down the temperature. But look at your senator, look at your governor, look at your member of Congress. And if they didn't say, deep breath, calm down. In this country, we don't have enemies. We have people who disagree with us, and that's a strength of this country. If they didn't take that tack, fire them. Fire them now.
All right. Fire them now. There you go, Congressman Jim Himes. And lastly, I've got Jimmy Kimmel from ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live last night. And then we will jump into my conversation with Celeste Headlee.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger-pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. Okay. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction. There's demolition, construction. This is not how an adult grieves the murder of someone he called a friend. This is how a 4-year-old mourns a goldfish, okay? And it didn't just happen once.
When I heard it, I was in the midst of, building for 150 years, they've wanted a ballroom at the White House, right? They don't have a ballroom. They have to use tents on the lawn for President Xi when he comes over. If it rains, it's a wipeout. And so I was with the architects that would design. It's going to be incredible. And they came in, they said, Charlie Kirk is dead. I didn't know what they meant. I said, he was dead. Charlie Kirk was shot. And they thought he was dead because it was so horrific, And I said, dead.
And then we installed the most beautiful chandelier. Sconces you wouldn't believe. There's something wrong with them. There really is. I mean, who thinks like that? And why are we building a $200 million ballroom in the White House? Is it possible that he's doing it intentionally so we could be bad about that instead of the Epstein list? By the time he's out of office... White House will have slot machines and a water slide. Trump is in major change the subject mode. On Friday, he stopped by the always friendly morning crew at Fox. Whenever Trump goes on Fox and Friends, it's funny because the hosts are so eager for him to be reasonable. They spell it all out for him. They desperately want to avoid having to nod along with anything crazy or contradict him. So they give him the question and their preferred answer, too.
Is the message, too, to the right, the people that are going to go, I want revenge, not to have revenge? Charlie Kirk would not want revenge.
You want revenge at the voter
That's
box.
where to go.
Okay, good answer, right? Take it to the ballot box. That's reasonable. That's almost presidential. But that's the thing. He can never just stop right there.
I can't always say at the ballot box because in some cases, like California, doesn't have ballot boxes.
Oh. Well, in that case, begin the purge. For the record, we live in California. We do have ballot boxes. We have ballot boxes. We've got mailboxes. We have lunch boxes. We have all kinds of boxes. You should come see them sometime. We'll give you a toolbox. You can live in it. Okay? And then we...
All right, there you go. Jimmy Kimmel last night on Jimmy Kimmel Live, and that is the clip show and the headlines that I've got for you today. Sorry I don't have more. I don't think that you actually care, but I always feel like I give myself a rating and review on each show in terms of the interview and the news headlines and the clips and how I perform it all and put it together. And this one's a 5. It's nothing amazing, but hopefully you got informed and caught up with some of the things that are happening in the world that I think are important, that many of us think are important. So there you go. Now, most importantly, I've got the great Celeste Headlee joining me. Celeste, of course, is a journalist, longtime NPR host. She is a speaker. She is an author. She is a teacher. She is a consultant. You should get all of her books, including Do Nothing, How to Break Away from Overworking, Overdoing, Underliving. Also, Speaking of Race, Why Everybody Needs to Talk About Racism and How to Do It, as well as We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter. She is a real smart cookie and very, very thoughtful and funny and empathic. We always love when we get to talk to her, and this aired live yesterday at youtube.com/standupwithpete, and I am very happy to share my conversation with Celeste Headlee right now. And also coming up, I just tagged onto this episode my appearance yesterday on Hal Sparks' television show, YouTube show, and we talked for about an hour. It was pretty good. It was pretty interesting. It was all about the Charlie Kirk assassination and the current zeitgeist moment in America. So I thought I would tag that on, and you can listen to that after my conversation with Celeste Headlee, which starts right now. Surprise! It's Celeste Headlee. Look who I brought with me to go live today. Thank you for joining me, Celeste.
It's always my pleasure to join you.
I started going live on all these different platforms a couple weeks ago, and it's all so much work, as you know, when you're doing it on your own. And one thing I don't do is very much promote to tell people that I'm going to be going live. So I didn't do that. So it's sometimes a surprise, but people are going to be real excited to see you here. And I know I'm very excited that you were able to talk to me. So let's get after. There's a few things to discuss, I think.
Yeah, I feel like every time I talk to you in the past, say 5 years, we start by saying there's a lot going on. Yeah. But there is a lot going on.
There's a lot going on because before the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we were in a real bad way in terms of what our Mad King was doing to the federal government, to almost every institution possible. Maybe just say a little bit about how you see what they're doing right now. Project 2025, Stephen Miller, they're really have this project underway, and they are every day seemingly going after different institutions and trying to persuade them, take them over, buy them out. It's so much different than Trump won.
You see this throughout history, if you pay attention, as I know you do, to the experts in some of these fields, those who have spent their careers studying authoritarianism, studying fascism. There's a step-by-step process that we are currently, I think Stacey Abrams said that we're now in step 9 of 10, that they are following. So nothing they are doing is surprising. It's awful in terms of what it means for our democracy, but it's not surprising, especially to the extent that we had so many warnings of people saying, hey, look, this is what's coming. Many Americans have become much too comfortable that when dire warnings happen, they don't.
Say more about that. Yes, say more about. It's a point I've been trying to make for a while, that people are becoming much more comfortable. I mean, I've been to a few different cities lately. I've been to all kinds of different events, stadiums, sporting events. Everybody seems to be doing fine. Nobody seems to be too worried. Nobody knows what democracy is or how we're going to lose it. What did you mean when you said people are too comfortable?
Well, the majority of Americans, even when horrible things happen and people say, look how horrible this is, they themselves aren't suffering. So they kind of shrug their shoulders and move on. I'm not saying, part of me is saying, yes, we've become less empathetic, although we could talk a little bit more about the changes that have occurred in empathy. But it so often happens that something has to make you have to feel the pain before you actually think that an event is significantly adverse. Now, marginalized communities, especially African Americans, immigrants, etc., have always felt the pain. When people said this is awful, that's who was usually suffering. But because the majority of Americans weren't directly feeling that suffering, they were okay. They were just trying to keep their heads above water. Now, I want to give people a caveat here, which is that we are in a situation now by design in which people literally do not have the cognitive space to worry about others. And that is very much by design and has been coming for well over 150 years. That capitalism believes that the best workers are those who have no options. Right. Because when you have options, you demand more. If something isn't living up to your expectations, you leave. The capitalist system has spent over a century trying to remove the options of workers so that if you quit, you lose you lose healthcare, you lose everything, every support system, right? So that they put NDAs on so that if they do treat you horribly and you leave, they'll sue you if you tell anybody, non-competes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They also didn't want anyone to have enough money to become financially stable. Your financial advisor will say, have at least 3 months' salary in the bank. Right? That is not the case for most Americans. As you and I both know, the vast majority of Americans can't cover, a $400 crisis without borrowing money. So if they keep everybody's wages depressed, that means we do not have a cushion. We don't have any safety nets, even in our bank accounts. So we cannot afford to job hunt. So I want to give people a little bit of an explainer here, not justification, but at least this is why this is happening. When you are under stress, when you are pressured, your brain is not able to extend compassion and empathy. You are in survival mode. And so many Americans are in survival mode and have been for some time, that the cognitive energy required to extend that compassion to others, it's not there. The energy is not there. So yes, it's awful. Yes, we need to do something about it. But what really has to happen is we have to stop having a nation full of people who are in distress.
Yeah. We're very far from that because people are in distress even regardless of their financial situation. We're not even talking about them potentially, because the distress is coming from everything being at a fever pitch, coming at you and worrying about the uncertainty of the future in ways none of us ever have. And then seeing the events play out every day, just adding to it more and more. Let's get specifically to the assassination of Charlie Kirk and all of the reactions around it and what it means. First of all, you are an expert on race and racism. You wrote a very important book about it. You've given all kinds of talks about it. You are a consultant on DEI. Like, you are one of the best people to talk to about this issue. And one of the listen, let me just put it succinctly. Charlie Kirk was one of the most outspoken racists sexists, and white Christian nationalists. He used his religion in the most insidious of ways, in my opinion. Like, there's very few you can put above him. Is that fair? How would you say, how would you talk about his views and his legacy on the issues of, specifically on race and I think women, gender, and LGBT?
I mean, again, neither you nor I need to say, but I will say, neither one of us supports assassination. Neither one of us would ever celebrate the murder of another person. So nothing I say or you say in the next 30 minutes or so has anything to do with celebrating or supporting the murder of Charlie Kirk.
Of course, yes.
But yes, it is dangerous to use his death, his violent death, as an excuse to forget the life that he lived, because he put so many people in danger. He started his political career by creating a McCarthy list. We have heard from professors that he put on his watch list, and about how they got death threats, how they sometimes had to flee their own homes. One professor was talking about receiving an email with a photo of his children leaving school. And when Charlie Kirk was confronted with what his watch list was doing, he kind of shrugged his shoulders. And he said, well, maybe they shouldn't be saying these things and threatening the right and being so awful. He has always equated speech on the left with violence, but his own speech not. There's always been a complete hypocritical view of free speech, not only from Charlie Kirk, from that entire cadre of right-wing extremists. So yeah, I mean, this is a man who said black women don't have the brain processing power to be taken seriously, so they steal a white person's slot. This is a person who talked about black people prowling the streets to look for white victims. I mean, this is a guy who very happily, gleefully, and lucratively spread hate and encouraged violence against others. And so we cannot allow his death to suddenly whitewash all that he did. You don't become a saint because you died. And that doesn't mean I wanted you to die. It certainly doesn't mean I wanted you to die violently or deserve to at all. I don't believe that. But it doesn't change what he did. He was an awful human being. He sent out his attack dogs against people who were trying to get people vaccinated and save their lives. He was constantly trying to get people fired and sometimes successfully got them fired. He's endangered the lives of marginalized people, LGBTQ people, so many people throughout his entire life. And his death, as tragic as it was, doesn't change that.
At our school board elections 2 years ago now, I'm sure I've talked to you about this, the issue became trans kids using bathrooms and then trans kids playing sports, of course, and week after week we had to deal with not only people in my town but young people. It didn't take long for us to find out that Turning Point USA was funding their operation. At one of the school board meetings, a young kid who I knew is a friend of my daughter's was handing out Turning Point USA buttons. He knew not to give me one, but he was handing them out, and they were targeting I think 2 or 3 trans kids in our school. So that's just my own personal experience with that organization infiltrating like every school district. That was a huge part of their agenda, and targeting the LGBT community was a main priority, and they have been very successful at it. So just wanted to mention that. What do you make, by the way, did you see yesterday and over the weekend or since his death, a lot of different professional sports games teams have been paying tribute to him? I saw the New York Yankees did. And then the NFL did in certain cities, and someone wrote, I can't find it, but it was like the most clever observation how, at the end in the NFL, they have end racism in some of the end zones, I think many of them. And then they were also paying tribute to one of the most, if not the most famous white supremacist at the same time. I don't know if there's anything to say about that. I just wanted to point out the performative.
It's the same thing we've seen over and over since Trump's second term began. If your organization, your company, whatever it is, dumps It's anti-racist efforts. It's inclusive efforts. This easily, you were never anti-racist. You were never inclusive. And it's the same thing with the NFL. Not that I ever took any of these efforts as anything more than performative. I didn't. But it's a deeper thing for me. Like, there's a reason why we're trying to put icons on the Wheaties box, right? Like, you want children to have good role models. But what bothers,
but not Colin Kaepernick.
Exactly. But if it is not only incredibly lucrative to be as hateful as possible, ironically enough, I hate how lucrative hatred is. Yeah. So it's not only incredibly lucrative to out-hate other people, but then we're going to hold these people up as icons. If we can't memorialize Charlie Kirk by using his own words without getting fired from the Washington Post, then this was not a person you want to be holding up to children as a role model. What are we saying to the next generation when we honor Charlie Kirk? Charlie Kirk, who had no honor. It's, this is a guy who tried to take down Martin Luther King Jr., somebody who just, weeks before that had been making money off of Martin Luther King Jr.'s memory by selling T-shirts and sweatshirts and other merchandise with MLK's image on them.
Really?
But then decided to take him down and removed all that merchandise so he could then sell merchandise that was anti-MLK. I mean, this is who we're honoring?
Yeah, this is where we're at right now. I mean, as you mentioned, someone mentioned in the chat, my friend Aaron, capitalism makes hate profitable, tying two of your main points in this conversation certainly together. And when you think about people in media, obviously people get elected as a result of the divisiveness and their fiery rhetoric. But in media, I mean, the most popular people for years, it's always been that. I mean, I've been talking about that just all the way back with right-wing talk radio. Why was Rush so popular? Why is Savage so popular? Mark Levin so popular? Because they're screaming and demonizing, and you couldn't do that on the left. I mean, people tried. It just didn't sell nearly the way that it does on the right. And we're activated here on Earth One in all kinds of different ways, but not the same by hatred. There really is a difference in empathy, something Charlie Kirk remarked that he finds his weakness. He said sympathy, not empathy, whatever the hell he thinks the difference is there. He certainly didn't demonstrate it. But that seems to be a big issue in this country too, a lack of empathy. Why are we so much more concerned when this person gets shot, who is a provocative hate monger, versus innocent children, which, by the way, a lot of people making the argument that one of the reasons this is so impactful is that it was caught on film. And if, God forbid, you saw the video where he was bleeding, it was horrific. But a lot of people argue, and have been arguing for a long time, that they should show the bodies of dead children whose families can only recognize them by the sneakers they're wearing. Because
that's the Elliot Till argument, right?
Emmett Till, yeah.
Emmett Till, excuse me. That's the Emmett Till argument, where his mother purposely chose to show him in the coffin, brutally beaten, so that people could see what racists had done to her son. And there's some validity to that, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons Emmett Till was such a shock to the nation, was to see this, such a tiny boy, just a boy, beaten, brutalized to that extent. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not a parent of a murdered child. I don't know how I would feel about that. I mean, I would think every single parent would have to decide that for themselves, but I certainly would never criticize a decision by someone who made the same choice that Emmett Till's mother did. I mean, look, one of the most chilling things for me in a decade of horrific chills is to find out that people on the right wing were calling certain groups of people NPCs. That,
I don't know what that means.
So in gaming,
NPC
means non-playable character. NPC are just those characters you interact with in a game that don't have a human being behind them, right? They're the bot. And when I heard that, like, it was super popular, and it was even emerging in the language of pundits and people who are being quoted in papers, that they were referring to certain groups of people like immigrants and others as NPCs. That means they're not seeing them as human.
That's
An
the ultimate
NPC is not a human.
It's a very insidious but also perfect way to dehumanize a person by calling them these non-playable characters. They don't have a life. They're lifeless. They're not controlled by a person. Yeah, it makes sense in gaming, and we're all learning a lot about gaming culture and rhetoric right now. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think every journalistic organization is behaving irresponsibly if they don't have at least one person on staff who is extremely well versed in the gaming culture, because one could say that a lot of this stems back to Gamergate, that Gamergate was one of our first real flags that this was going to get bad and it was going to be dangerous. One could say that. Gamergate, for those who don't remember, was of course when women who were game critics were targeted by the right wing and threatened, like very realistically threatened, credibly threatened. Their lives were threatened, and they had to, in some cases, live in other places and hide for months and months and months because they were under such constant threat. But in any case, that moment when I saw somebody quoted referring to a group as NPCs, it's just to take us back to the moment talking about empathy. You know, we're all in real trouble when people begin seeing other people as just faceless, non-human, disposable creatures, as prey. You know, in a game, NPCs are often the ones you shoot. That's the people, Grand Theft Auto, that you run over with your car. I mean, it's been mulling around in my mind for a really long time, because what does this mean? I mean, I don't think we've really grappled with the fact. We keep talking about how we can't speak to the other side, and you know how I feel about that, and other people are just evil or they're racist or whatever. But how do we grapple with the fact that there's a significant portion of the population that sees us as killable? And that puts Brian Kilmeade's comment saying that homeless people should get non-voluntary lethal injections. Kill them?
Yeah, you're a media critic, a media member, a journalism expert, a journalist. What do you make of the firing of MSNBC of Matthew Dowd versus the Fox News? It's always that double standard, right? Like nobody really gets fired. A lot of times people on the right, Fox News in particular, I guess, is a good example because they have a giant corporate structure, an HR department, editorial, lawyers, they're indemnified and so on. But like they never fire almost ever. I can't think of them firing anybody but Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly was from internal behavior, and Tucker Carlson. But other than that, like people have said and say horrible things all the time on Fox News and never get fired. What's your take on the firing of anybody who's saying anything here in the aftermath, and why it's seemingly a big old double standard?
Yeah, I mean, people don't get fired at Fox News for saying blatantly false things, just making crap up.
Yeah,
and those people would be fired immediately at NPR, for example.
Yeah,
you know, obviously Karen Attiah got fired as a Washington Post columnist because she made a social media thread of just the things Charlie Kirk has said. And that got her fired. You know, we've Fox News, but you know, I'll say this. I think what we're seeing here is the inevitable result of news organizations not being run by journalists. You know, for a very, very long time, our news organizations have been corporate. Some of the CEOs and executives are hedge fund managers. They're not journalists and have never been journalists. And there's such a massive gulf between journalism and the people running journalistic organizations that there's no way they're going to stand up for their journalists or their journalism. So of course they'll fire Karen Attiah. To them, it's like firing the head of a department. Big deal. Better that than have to face any pushback, right?
Yeah.
We're far from the Ben Bradleys of the past who had courage, whose careers were deeply steeped in journalistic standards and ethics and stand by their journalism. And this is what comes of that. I mean, I haven't watched cable news in a very, very long time, except when the clips come across my social media feed. And this is why it's not journalism I can be proud of as a journalist. And I support other organizations who are really doing the work.
Yeah. It's such a big problem. I mean, there's just, again, this double standard at some of us just demand certain behavior and professional ethics of our journalistic outlets. And that doesn't mean that if you support an outlet that if they do this or that, it means that they're all bad necessarily. I think we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good sometimes. But let's pick on the New York Times specifically. Ezra Klein is getting a lot of grief for the piece that he wrote after Charlie Kirk died about how Charlie Kirk did politics right. I think maybe the headline was misleading. Maybe there were some good points in it. I'm not sure. But I know you had mentioned something about it on Blue Sky. And I also just want to get your general take on debate. I got my head torn off by listeners and subscribers of mine at our hangout the other night when I said that Charlie Kirk was great at debate. Everybody just started screaming at me. It was like, it wasn't debate. He's not a debater. And since I've seen a lot of people saying similar things, he's more of a stand-up comedian doing crowd work, taking you to where he wants to go and then thumping you for the clip. But what do you think about that part of the conversation that we're hearing? You talked about free speech, but what about his style of debate? What about Ezra Klein's comments and column and what he might be missing?
I mean, I agree with those who criticized you. Charlie Kirk wasn't good at debate. He would have failed in debate class. Having studied rhetoric more than I ever thought I would, mostly because, my career is in teaching people how to disagree constructively. And that's rhetoric. Yeah, he would have failed a class in that. He was not a good debater. For one thing, you get marked off a lot of points for saying inaccurate, untrue things. So that's just one thing. He did not contribute to an environment of civil debate in this country or any country. He also did the same shtick, the same dog and pony show in the UK. I mean, I would say, if anything, Charlie Kirk has been a major force degrading the level of not just debate, but also conversation, period, in this country. You don't get to call people garbage, all the things that he called people, and then say also you're advocating for civil disagreement. Those two things cannot be true at the same time. I myself have had a shock this week when I saw somebody posting. I had an intern, a trainee for over a year in when I was working for public radio in Atlanta, named Olivia Reingold. She's now working for the Free Press, Barry Weiss's publication. And someone had posted about her social media commentary, and she went to, I guess, the Columbia University bookstore and held up 2 books saying, look at what they have they're selling in the Columbia University bookstore. And they were like 2 outstanding books. One's called The Color of Law, and the other one was from Robert Dahl. I mean, how do you come for Robert Dahl? And I got to tell you, Pete, it was so disappointing just on such a deep level for me. I mean, even for me, it's so much easier to look at someone who is that far into delusion and imagine their path being one where they were always sort of raised in those values and then got further and further encouraged to go to the right and to the extremes. But here's someone who wasn't, who was really well trained, and she's bright and well educated, and she had plenty of exposure to all kinds of different people. On my recommendation, she got accepted to the Next Generation radio program, which is a highly selective program for young journalists. She did a great series on Indigenous issues, and to imagine that this is where she is.
Yeah.
Throwing disgrace
it's
on the industry.
It's interesting that you mention her and that organization, because I followed a young kind of Instagram influencer, environmentalist named Lucy Biggers, who is now also at Free Press, and she's completely flipped her views on climate and sustainability. And it's like, well, I don't know what pill they're taking that would change these 2 women, younger women, into the views that they have now, but I don't know, maybe something Barry Weiss is real good at that. And now that organization looks like it's going to be like in charge of CBS News, the famed.
I just can't. I mean, it brings us back to that point of how lucrative it is to be awful. I just
we should be more.
Still believes the world is at heart just. That part of me is horrified.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. We should fake how one time we should go on and just be as awful as we can. I don't think I know you would struggle to do it. You wouldn't be convincing. I could
I'm
probably
too earnest.
Yeah. You're too earnest. I could do it, but it wouldn't be that convincing to anybody who knows me. But like, it's the idea that you can, a lot of it is so performative. And as a comedian who's turned into a pseudo journalist, like I'm very sensitive and offended by people's performances on politics on radio and TV and the internet now. And I'm very critical of that. I can see it a mile away, and it's so disingenuous. But as you said, all right, it's so very, very profitable too. One of the things that Charlie Kirk made popular, Ben Shapiro, and now a lot of progressives as well. Almost everybody is doing this now, is they caption their videos. Charlie Kirk destroys student. And those get the clicks, and then we watch them. You know, a lot of liberal progressives are doing that now. I try to do it like with the thumbnails where like Pete Dominic gets destroyed about myself, but nobody
demolishes Celeste Headlee.
9 views.
Pete Dominic humiliates well-known black liberal libtard in Maryland. I'm not good at these.
Yeah, I need your voiceover. I need your evildoer voiceover from the Legion of Doom on these. But too many words for the thumbnail. So you're not good at it. You need like 2 words.
I'm terrible at it.
And you've got to have a thesaurus for the word destroys. You know they're using it because they just got to keep changing. Obliterates, destroys. But that is what counts for a lot of, quote, credible media today. People, those are what gets the clicks, as you said. And that's the algorithm, and that's the world that we live in. What do you make of how it is being handled by Trump and Republicans? You know, I mean, it's worth commenting on the fact that when Democrats were killed in cold blood in Minnesota, Trump and Republicans didn't say much or anything, or they even, you know, Trump said,
remember
I'm not
Donald Trump said it wasn't worth calling the family?
Or
they
the governor?
That put flags at half-mast. You know, think about, it hasn't been that long. It was maybe May when when Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis was made public. Right. And some of the horrific things that right-wing people, Laura Loomer, for example, saying she's so glad he's suffering and she hopes his wife, I'm paraphrasing, she hopes his wife gets to watch him rot away, right? Like, to try and argue at this point, to try and argue the hypocrisy of this with people who are now saying you can't say anything mean about Charlie Kirk is a losing proposition. It is impossible to argue logic with people who are behaving illogically. And they're not always behaving illogically because they themselves are not smart. I don't think Stephen Miller is an idiot. I just think he knows how effective it is to just keep persisting with a lie. Because in the environment in which we're living, there's no accountability for lying. You can continue to say that the big, beautiful bill doesn't cut Medicaid, and people will not stop interviewing you. They will not stop inviting you to come on and repeat your lie. You can just keep saying it. And it's the same thing with illogical things, racist things, hateful things. You can just keep saying that because at no time are you going to face penalties, except for average people, right? Sometimes they lose their jobs for saying, you know, the N-word or whatever. But for anybody in the public eye, there is zero punishment. There is zero accountability for disinformation, misinformation, hate speech, etc. There was a couple posts from sitting U.S. senators that struck my eye. My own senator who went down to South America to try and get Kilmar Abrego Garcia out, because Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a Marylander, and said it's time to stop worrying about the messaging and how it's coming across, and it's time to fight. Then we got this thread from Chris Murphy today, who's the senator from Connecticut, saying basically something dark might be coming, I think he said. And he goes through a relatively long thread, especially for a senator. He said, we need to be prepared. If I'm right, everyone who cares about democracy has to join the fight right now. Join a mobilization or protest group. Start showing up to actions more. Write a check. Like, from a sitting senator, Pete. I mean, can you remember seeing this kind of thing from a U.S. senator?
Yeah, I didn't like that one. I saw that, and I think he's a very serious and sober guy. And I think that he and J.B. Pritzker and Gavin Newsom and several others, named 3 white guys, but we should be the ones that are saying these things. It's a lot more impactful when we say them than when a black woman says it in many ways. And so, as you know, I think it's important that they're saying these things and they're making the kinds of warnings and laying out the strategy that we're about to see play out. It almost reminds me of the Biden administration foreign policy apparatus when Russia was about to invade Ukraine. They said, this is going to happen. They're going to say this. They're going to do a false flag, all this. And it's basically, they predicted and it made things just a little bit better in terms of strategy to know that we saw this coming, that they had the intel to see this coming. I see that right now with the 3 I mentioned and plenty of others who are sober-minded white male leaders saying, this is what we're seeing happening. This is what we think they are trying to do, and especially talking about the midterm elections and potential, martial law declarations, the kinds of things that only some of the histrionic left have been predicting would happen, or anybody who's studied authoritarianism.
I mean, as a female, anytime we start calling people hysterical, my hackles go up, right? Like, there's a lot less hysteria than people say there is.
Well, there needs to be more. It's a derogatory sexist term when women are using it, but there needs, I think, to say what we were talking about earlier, there needs to be more hysteria. There needs to be, most of us that are paying attention are panicking pretty effectively and have been in a deep state of panic for a decade. But a lot of other people, including a lot of young people, for any number of reasons, are not necessarily concerned day to day. And we can talk about why that is. But
I mean, I live in the DMV, just outside Washington, D.C. Yep. And so no one here is comfortable. My own neighborhood, I have a food pantry on my front lawn, right? I put up a little, what was a free book, a little book.
It used to be a book nook. Now there's perishable.
Now it's food. Ever since the pandemic, I fill it with non-perishable items.
I love that.
And we spend about $500 a month. $300 to $500 a month filling that thing. And we can't keep up with the need. There have been so many federal job losses. And just like in many neighborhoods, people here were already holding on to financial stability by the tips of their fingers, right? Like everyone is in a state where just a month or 2 of disruption in their income and they're in real trouble. And I just reposted the link for donating to the pantry because we can't, I hate it. I hate it when someone comes to that pantry and they'll come sometimes with a little shopping bag and it's empty. And my impulse to run out there and fill it just for them is so strong. But if I do that,
that's one of the things that you do that I know you do. And I know there's a lot of things that you do that I don't know you do. And, to wrap this up in a somewhat positive note, I've been trying to do this a lot lately is just focus on what we can do. We're here. It's arrived. Fascism is here. Authoritarianism here. The troops are in the streets. People are being targeted. People are terrified. Things are going to get worse. And I'm an optimist and I still can't help but think that. And so what I'm trying to do is build community. We just had a live event. The next one I hope you'll be able to come to if we can find a way to make it all work. And bringing people together, as I do every Monday and Thursday night, has been really great virtually. Those are just a couple of things I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to do a lot more. And you have all kinds of things that you're doing to build community all the time in many different ways. So talk about the importance of that. This is not the first time humanity has been in this type of situation, and it's not the first time humanity has reacted this way by trying to connect other humans with each other, trying to help each other. My friend Mara Quint just had this great idea where she invites people to their home, and you write on a card something that you need help with or done, something reasonable. I need a shelf put up. I could use help driving my kid to school once a week. The other people don't like to ask for help. They say, I can do that. And it gives people purpose, and we're in this, but we have to live in it. We have to find purpose. We have to try to connect each other. I'm finding that to be a very rewarding thing to try to do, but I want to learn more and I want to spread it. And I know you're one of the experts, which is one of the things, reasons I wanted to talk to you today, because you've been doing it your whole life.
You know, building community is so incredibly important. And we see this throughout history, that getting through the times that we're in, and this is not the first time that the United States has been in real danger of fascism, or even has lived through some version of authoritarianism. It's happened before. And what is communities not only building, but supporting one another, supplying those needs that suddenly the town, the state is not supplying or is actively taking. We can do that for one another. And as you say, you don't even have to be comfortable asking for help. Right. For me, that's just been about creating a space for people to meet one another and chat. Yeah. And these things arise. We'll start to get to know one another's needs and likes and dislikes. And we as human beings will naturally form those bonds and support one another. And I just want to emphasize, and I know I beat this drum a lot, but supporting one another and building a community with people, working well with one another, does not mean you like them. It's totally disconnected. You don't necessarily have to like somebody to work well with them, to create a network with them, to rely on them. That's the way Homo sapiens is built. We do it beautifully. We have 300,000 years of evolution, making us perhaps the best at building community on the planet. And that is how we will survive or not.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and a great place to end. And also the point, I mean, like, I, for example, don't like you, but I think you're so good. Every time you join me, everybody else loves when you join. I don't care for your takes, but
your
I
laugh
think
makes me want to strangle you, and yet
I have all. I can't keep going. Oh God, when you're talking, I'm like, why do people even listen to her or read her or watch her
listen
TED
to
Talk?
this bitch.
I heard
Yeah,
somebody told you, somebody told you to, have you ever thought of doing a TED Talk? How many views is your TED? That must have been infuriating. How many views does your TED Talk have? Like a billion?
Nearly 40 million. I can help you do a TEDx talk.
You should do a TED Talk.
You? I know.
Did you respond to that person with a link to your TED Talk? Maybe like this one? They're like, that's not even you.
I responded saying, read my bio, period. Because it literally says top TED speaker. Come on, man.
That's amazing.
Everybody's got to make a living, but at least.
Just wish you snapped and were like, do you know who I am, motherfucker? Wow, Celeste is really at her wit's end.
I'm not important enough to do the whole "do you know who I am" thing, but like,
ow. To us, you are. Kim Nyborg says, my favorite guest on the live chat. I like doing the live chat. All right, I'll let you go. Thanks to the hundreds of people who joined us in the live chat, and thank you to everybody who is supporting our work. I can't do this without you. And Celeste, what do you want to plug to all those people that are watching or listening? Anything that you are doing or wanting to plug?
I'll plug my pantry. It can really use the help. People are hungry. Like, they're not getting filet mignon. Like, they're getting black beans and rice, right? So please, if you have an extra $5, donate to our neighborhood. And also, if you want to learn how to converse with other people without getting in a fight with them, my nonprofit, Headway, training.org.
And you can hire
teaches classes, online classes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Is there a link or a website for the food pantry?
It's just headwaytraining.org.
And for the food pantry thing?
The food pantry, I put it in it's the top, it's the pinned tweet on my Blue Sky. It's
great.
like if you look in GoFundMe for help keep our neighborhood pantry stocked.
Not only send, Celeste $5, even more, pay it forward. Maybe you should have a food pantry in your yard, or someone that feels comfortable doing that in theirs.
Yeah, it's super easy. It's super easy.
I like that.
The things you're afraid of don't happen. Nobody's going to come and bug you.
Have you made
so easy?
I feel like I'm on an explainer video, like a 1-minute explainer on what you're doing and how you do it. The food pantry thing.
That's a good idea. That's
because
a really
everybody
good idea,
should replicate that.
I do hope other people do it. Yeah, it's so easy to do. And it does make you feel good that you're doing something.
Yeah, take a few pictures and send me a voiceover and I'll put it together or something. I'll edit something together if you don't have the time or desire to do it. That way I can do a little something for it. It's such a great idea, and I love that idea, and I've heard you bring it up, and I've seen pictures of it as well. And so either support yours or start your own. That's just one little thing, one little suggestion, and a great idea. Thank you so much, Celeste, for joining me.
My pleasure, as always, Pete. Have a great week.
Yeah, there she goes, Celeste Headlee. I hope you liked that and appreciate it as much as I did. You can watch it on YouTube. Go subscribe over there and go support everything that Celeste is doing. Go follow her on Blue Sky. Mention to her that you heard her here on the show as well. You can see that she's got a little picture of that box, the food pantry box on her at her house at the top of her Blue Sky. So go check that out. Okay. Well, I also decided I would tag my conversation with Hal Sparks on today's show. I was asked to join Hal on his YouTube show yesterday. We talked for about an hour. I thought it was pretty interesting. Hal's a real funny, smart, thoughtful, passionate guy, hosts a great show, and I got the audio of it and wanted to add it on here for your extra listening enjoyment. So check this out at Hal Sparks' YouTube show, Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide, where it originally aired, and I would love to hear from you on what you think of it. Let's do it right now.
Perfect. All right. I'll bring you in right now. Ladies and gentlemen, host of Stand Up with Pete Dominic, which, ironically or specifically, how are you?
Great to see you, Hal. Sorry I'm late. I think I was in the wrong place, but I'm very excited to be on your show, and I'm very excited to see you. You look great. You sound great. You look fit.
I'm doing all right. Yeah. I'm holding it together. I'm not getting a lot of sleep lately, though, because I'm on multi-house duty where everyone around me went on vacation at the same time. And so I volunteered to pet sit and make sure everybody's animals are fed, which I do. And I'm fine with that. It's just all of it at once. I have a theory that they thought a asteroid was going to hit Las Vegas and they just all left town at the same time. Just, hang out and we'll be back if it doesn't happen. But all's well. Anyways, hi. Lots of, obviously, sorry to bring you in on a slow news week, but you and I have not been able to speak, recently about the current unpleasantness and all that stuff. So I'd love to get your take right out of the gate on the kind of cascading, fumbling. I have my own theories of the motivations of the shooter and the relation to this, and Trump basically begging for some kind of civil war out of all this nonsense.
Yeah, Hal, it is a lot, obviously, and I think that we need to understand how much has changed in the world of political assassinations, the motivations for them, how they're done, who, it's still overwhelmingly white men doing it. But I mean, the internet has changed everything, and the internet radicalizes people. Last night, I think it was in Arizona, where what's her name, Carrie Lake, was like, "Never send your kids to college. This guy was a Trumper, and as soon as he went to college," but it's the internet. The kid went to one semester of college in a Mormon state. So I think that people need to understand a lot of the terminology that a lot of experts have been talking about, from groypers to, black pilling to incel to all these things that aren't motivated. These shooters aren't necessarily, and we don't quite know this one specifically yet, but we got some good educated guesses. And of course, the thing that ties them all together is that the internet is available everywhere in the rest of the world, but only in America do you have more guns than people and the accessibility to them. So I mean, I think some things remain the same.
Actualizing. actualizing your radicalism is a lot easier. You don't have to, scramble to put together explosives. You don't have to scramble to put together a bomb. You don't have to scramble to put together a gun. You can get all the parts and do that. All right. So I wrote on my Substack a little while back about a group relatively little known at the time called the Zizians. Are you familiar at all with the Zizians and the La Rosa intrigue of this trans-identifying vegan rationalism cult, a breakaway of the rationalism community online that had killed 6 people? Their leader faked his/her death by pretending to drown off a boat that they had bought that they were going to tow to San Francisco and live on in the Bay rent-free while they ran solar panels to because they all had jobs at Google and Zoom and all these big tech companies, because they were all incredibly bright, all of them engineers or tech people, majority trans identifying, in varying degrees of transition, not because of the gender specific trans identifying aspect that most people think of, people who have gender dysphoria and want to transition from one gender to the other, but from a transhumanism, which Donald Trump thinks is transgender for everybody, and this is kind of where he gets it from, this transhuman idea of just body modification and functional modification, do whatever it takes to win and break through and gain control in certain areas. And so this will allow you to, they could literally sleep in women's shelters because they identified as women. And so they could move around the country. And this was part of their plan. Long story short, they murdered a pair of their parents, one kid's parents. They killed a Border Patrol agent. 3 of them are on trial and are possibly going to receive the death penalty for that because they were driving over the border at the time. And then the one that had allegedly drowned off the boat showed up in the next hotel room when they raided a hotel room and found the 2 shooters, or the 2 people who supplied the guns to shooters. Anyways, rationalism has been this kind of borderline, was for a long time almost a leftist new atheist cult, a break off from new early 2000s new atheism online, kind of like, and there's this, the reason it pricked up my ears was because there's this overlay with the trans identifying community and the furry crowd and gamers and Gamergate that went alt-right, and this kid and the people around him reeks of it. And that's why the governor, I think, is having a hard time explaining what the logic is, because nobody has heard about this stuff, and they don't have a particular ideology.
Yeah,
they don't. They just want it all to break down, so they don't care how they do it.
By the way, my band, the Zizians, is probably going to
touring.
Have to cancel change our name. I didn't realize.
I always thought you should have called yourselves the Asians, not just because it's more appropriate, but also because it puts you at the front of the line in the CD store. When you go buy CDs.
Oh, that's a good point. It's just a bunch of bald-headed white guys.
You're back there with ZZ Top, and you sound nothing like them. You guys are all techno.
The Asians are touring now. I think that the point you made about the governor of Utah not understanding, I think it's probably even more important that almost nobody in media understands it. You just explained something that I wasn't familiar with, and it's like kind of alt media and independent media and niche media that is doing a really good job trying to understand this or living to some extent in that world themselves. I mean, MSNBC's got like one woman named Brandy Zadrozny who's very good, but she's got way too much on her plate following a lot of these different kinds of conspiracies and these different subcultures, these internet, Reddit, dark web subcultures. I mean, I interviewed Gil Duran, who is a really smart journalist who educated me and a lot of others on, and is doing a great job with linguist George Lakoff at their Substack and media outlet, talking to us about the tech billionaires and the techno state and all the things that they want, which there's some overlap here. But the point I'm trying to make is if our government leaders can't keep up It used to be, run-of-the-mill traditional type terrorism that they couldn't keep up with. Adapting the techniques, the way that they were communicating at times over video chat, video games, and so on. If our government can't do it and journalism and media can't do it, it's going to be hard for the public to understand and wrap their head around that. And we're going to go into our traditional crouches and corners as to conservative and liberal and never understand. And I think it's really important to understand the root causes of any problem, so that you can develop a threat matrix to defend against that problem or to fight against that problem. And we are way behind in all the important institutions, it would seem, except for the Hal Sparks show, apparently, who understands this deeply.
Well, yeah, I dive into these kind of things. Anytime I recognize that someone is dodging the explanation when they desperately want it to be cut and dry.
Yeah.
The Republicans would love for this to be a very obvious, like, trans sociopath goes on, kills pure of heart Christian right winger and therefore sets off what they would like to be the Civil War. The problem is that the trans partner / roommate of the shooter is cooperating, whereas the effectively straight identifying shooter himself is not. His trans roommate turned him in immediately when he sent those things about help me go pick up the gun. It's wrapped in a towel in the woods. That's why there were FBI agents in that area looking for the gun, was because the trans roommate / partner called the cops. And so that's why the governor and everybody else is having a real hard time, except Trump, who's just making it up as he goes along. Make this fit a narrow narrative that feeds what is effectively, and I blame branding. I blame the fact that everybody is so narrow casting these days that they're almost trapped in their own box. You can't be victimized by somebody who's inside your box even a little bit. And so you have to otherize everyone all the time. Look at Thomas Crooks. Look at Routh, who's in court this week. Both of them Trump supporters. Both of them, in one case, the idea was Crooks thought he didn't go far enough. He was closer to being a groyper, like we're talking about with Robinson. Routh was one of these people who just was a purist on everything except one issue, and then was nuts.
And
some people,
and
all kinds of other stuff.
And Mark David Chapman wanted to impress Jodie Foster. Assassins don't always fit into a box on your team or another. I mean, even the guy who killed the Minnesota legislators had some, he had some Christian nationalist views, obviously a Republican, conservative, Trump supporter. We can go on and on. But, to me, I think the solutions to these, there isn't really any easy solution. But to me, it always comes back to the ubiquity and accessibility and passion for firearms in America. And if you could make it harder for some people to get guns, that would make the killing maybe a little less, as we've seen in the states where they've been able to do that. So, I mean, sometimes
I agree. Yeah,
it's important.
I certainly think that is the case with handguns, especially like in the case of the kid that shot up the Catholic school a couple of weeks ago. Or people who last minute buy a handgun and but this 30-06 rifle is the low hanging fruit that was in that household for decades, more than likely.
I didn't know that.
That's a gun from the early 80s. You know what I mean? This is not top line. Thomas Crooks had an AR-15. I believe, and so, or an equivalent. And the rifle this person was using was a deer rifle that they'd had for a long time. So even if we'd have made up our mind 10 years ago to start cleaning up after a lot of these guns that were out there, if Beto O'Rourke had his gun seizures, this would not been one of the guns they would have taken.
Right. And I think it's important. It's an important point to make, but at the same time,
but I think it's ego. I think ultimately, no matter the one thing all these people have in common is an isolationist mentality linked with a total self-absorption. And they believe that their gripe is more important than the life of another human being. Whatever that is, what you can put all the, like the Unabomber. I think these people have a lot more in common with the Unabomber in that, he wanted people to read his stupid paper so much that he blew up a bunch of secretaries and and tried to kill people in the post office and airplanes.
I think that's probably true around ego, but I think the even more accurate, wonder what you think, issue that connects a lot of, not all these shooters, well, they're all men almost entirely, but is loneliness. And we've learned for years from experts on extremism, especially these anti-government white Klan types, that a lot of these guys they're lonely and they get recruited and they just want to hang out with a bunch of their buddies. And you can do that now online over and around any single topic that you're interested in. You've got your community here. Yeah. I've got my community. We are non-violent and not instilling violence and so on. But the bottom line is loneliness brings people to certain spaces. It used to be an actual literal space that people would have to meet in the woods and talk about how they're going to kill black folks or whatever it is. But now it's the internet. You can find anybody else. So a lot of times,
Spawn Ranch.
Yeah. It's a lot of times it's loneliness that brings these people to these spaces where they become absolutely radicalized by these crazy theories that I still don't understand as well, apparently, as Hal Sparks.
Yeah. Well, okay. So just to clarify, and I'm fairly certain this is going to play out this way because it's got all the signs of this group. So the rationalism groups that broke off, which came from a blog I believe called Less Wrong in the mid-aughts, or maybe 2011, 12, somewhere around then, is based on this idea of AI doomerism and and technocracy based on everything must be decided through rationalism. And there's subscribers to it on a pedestrian sense, like the Presbyterians of this movement are all in Silicon Valley. Yeah. And you'll hear this from people like Elon Musk talking about first principles all the time. And where first principles is the kind of like, let's look at a problem and let's see what the real parts of the problem is. And we'll disassemble it and put it back together. And that if you're making Candy Crush, who gives a shit? You're not going to get nobody's going to get killed over that. It doesn't matter. If you fail, it won't change the world. When you go after Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, then you're really like this move fast break thing shit. That's also crucial to this rationalism idea. It kills people. It harms people's lives. And at the very fringe of it, you get pedophiles referring to themselves as MAPs, the minor attracted persons. You get furryism as a militancy, those kind of things. And it is arguably the same as like the outer edge of the Groypers on the other side. I am convinced that there's so much overlap on a bunch of these issues that we're no longer dealing with like fence post extremism, far left and far right, but the crust of the pizza that thinks it's the pizza. And the crust is now convinced.
I don't know about your crust metaphor, but I guess it works. But do you think, and I worry that from what I'm learning about this kind of online culture, that it gets worse because it's copycat. It's let me outdo, and it's content creation. Assassination is content creation,
right?
And that concerns me a lot because again, the authorities have no idea what they're doing, and neither do a lot of journalists that need to be able to explain this to us. And I think probably most importantly, so we can protect ourselves and so we can find it in our own sons. Again, I'm going to stick mostly to young men here, to make sure that you know what your kid is doing online. And that's not always easy as a parent necessarily, but we could all do better. We did a pretty good job. My daughters are now 17 and 20. They're not young men either, but never were. But I think
have a son. And he's my son is 14, like entering basically into that window of stuff. And he's social, and we're social as a family, but also as his testosterone starts to show up in greater and greater amounts, that is also something to be aware of during that transition time biologically in a young man, because the intensity of the hormonal attachment to feelings increases during that window quite a bit, and it does it shockingly fast. And there are myriad attempts to throttle it, to attempt to stop the loneliness, whether it's alcohol or in the case of the Zizian rationalists through transition, that they will monitor and modify their hormones not because they're transitioning through something, but because they belong to a subculture that believes your body, your choice ultimately means transhumanist modification of yourself. Right. And why not start now, since AI is going to kill us in 5 years anyways? And there's a ton of that. That is the fastest growing, red zone on the internet right now. That area.
Are you sure it's the fastest growing? Or are you just saying that to be hyperbolic?
Yes. No. I'll tell you why. Because the white supremacist Stormfront kind of Groyper crowd or whatever has been around for a while. It's borderline gentrified. If you listen to Nick Fuentes compared to KKK guys of the 70s, he sounds practically grandfatherly. Yeah. He sounds like, Orrin Hatch at times. If you caught him on a hot mic. But the rest of it sounds pretty patient about a lot of these things. Like his plan is, he even came out with a big, if you engage in violence, you're out of the movement, statement, which is very, it's diplomatic for where he's already moved into that diplomatic phase. These people have not. And it is untethered from worth. The value is the action. The action has value, even if it's unsuccessful. And there's a thing that popped up in this that really, we've had a problem with on our side, which is accelerationist. Mm-hmm. Susan Sarandon is an accelerationist. Mm. And for those that don't know, accelerationism is this belief that it's all going to go to shit. And after that, we can build a utopian, communist, socialist, authoritarian, monarchical, doesn't matter. Whatever they think is on the other side of the system we're in collapsing, that's when it'll all build back magically, because the system is the thing holding back people from being their best selves. And so if it fell apart, we'd all just start pulling together after Katrina.
I think you need to, when you say we have an issue on our side too, and I'm sure you're right, but I think we need to think of a better example than Susan Sarandon, who's 70.
Well, no, she's an accelerationist in the classic sense, in that she's vote for Trump so the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, but that was 10 years ago, and she's got no clout, and so I'm interested in who on our side.
I'm using it. That's an analogy for what the movement is about. What I'm saying is that online in this group, these are super accelerationists. Mm. You understand? They're kill somebody, start the Civil War. Well, you could argue that Manson was an accelerationist like this. Yeah, but Manson thought, we'll trigger a race war by writing pigs on the wall in the blood and pretending this was done by black people. That's what the plan was. That's what Helter Skelter was. And this is Helter Skelter 2.0.
I get it. I hear what you're saying, but I think that instead of saying on our side, and again, I would be unhappy to be wrong on this. I hope I'm right, but I do think that when we talk about sides, I use the phrase Earth One a lot.
Well, I'm not saying they're on our side. I'm saying on our side of the spectrum, if I had an example to give of someone who's an accelerationist, it's Susan Sarandon, right, but just so people can get a grip on the idea.
I think
these people are not on our side. They're also not on the right's side either. They believe that that's why this guy was non-aligned. It's why he was not registered as a Democrat or Republican. It wasn't an accident. He's not an independent. This is a specific part of this group.
Sure. And I think that everything you're saying is accurate of especially these young folks and the category of people we're talking about. But I'd like to further the conversation to a certain extent. I mean, I think it's interesting hearing people talk about what's important to them. And I think that we can divide ourselves to a certain extent amongst those who have regard for others, those who are empathic about strangers, those who don't want to be silent in the face of tyranny of this right-wing regime, certainly. But the idea that Charlie Kirk and so many on the right, they try to act like they are thoughtful Christians, but they're not. I mean, they're terrible people if they don't know who you are, but around large swaths of people. So there's some of us who still care about strangers, who believe in empathy, who want to connect people, build community, and care about people who we can't relate to. And by the way, don't wish suffering on people who we hate. There's a guy I went to high school with. We have 20 people, in a chat of high school friends, which I love. It's pretty impressive. When Charlie Kirk died, one of the guys who I knew was MAGA, but nobody ever talked politics in there, dropped in and paid tribute to Charlie Kirk. And I called him what he is. And I told him to lose my number. And because he doesn't have, he pretends to be a Christian, but he doesn't have regard for people he doesn't know. And most importantly, I said to him, I don't wish you, his name is John, I don't wish you or your family any suffering. But the fact is you support and probably believe in the suffering of others. And I don't. And that's the kind of the way I'm separating people right now. What do you think of that? Is that too?
Sure. Okay. There are a couple of things. One is I get that. I always give people room to hurt before I move in for correction. So I will always, if somebody is in a sad space about something, even a stranger, I automatically give them space, because part of the thing about being, if they're going to just evangelically sell Christian values, I'm going to embody them as best I can and maybe hope that that's part of their come around.
Right.
And the other thing too with these guys is that I don't know that they perceive what he's doing as an act of making other people suffer. They have this perception, and I think this is the thing we have to focus on breaking, that they're the ones suffering and that's the cause. That these people, these trans people are trying to cut their kid's dick off. That black people are murdering everybody on trains everywhere. Just see it, look on your phone, and they're murdering everyone, and we're not doing anything about it. Nobody's going to jail. They're just releasing them out on the street like it's a Dirty Harry movie in 1968. And they think this all the time. Now they're deluded and full of shit, and some of them use that as a mask for their own bigotry, no question. But there's a good portion of these assholes who are just as online deluded as this shooter very well may have been, in that they fucking think Twitter is a window pane. They look at it and they go, I saw 100, black crimes yesterday. And I saw this one woman calling for forced castration of males until they pass a test on whether they should procreate, and a woman-only world, and blah, 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 like libs of TikTok.
By the way, I do support a few of those, I should mention.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think most of us dreamt of a, Mars Needs Women kind of, vacation spot when I was 16. That was my dream vacation. I just come back dehydrated.
Well, I do.
Anyways,
go.
You know what I mean?
I
think they don't. I agree with you. I think oddly enough, they agree with you. Just they're different on the target. And I think that's the part where some of them aren't reachable. If your friend's a bigot, I don't know him, so I can't speak to it.
He's a bigot.
But
if he's terrible. I mean, he's not my friend either, I should say, but he's in the group, and I told him in my private text, I go, hey, listen, we were never friends. But I think you make a really good point, and I'm glad that you did. I want to underscore that one of the most, I'll never forget where I was sitting. I was at SiriusXM back in the day, about to go on live on my show, and I remember reading the statistic, like this Pew or Gallup survey that said like 61% of white Americans feel that they are more discriminated against than people of color. That was years ago, Hal, that I read that statistic, that it was taken. Right. And I think you're absolutely right about white men especially feeling like they are the aggrieved. They are the victims. My ex-father-in-law was always pissed because he got passed over for a promotion because he said of affirmative action when he worked at Ford in the assembly line. And he said, they gave a black guy the job over me. And I said to him, did it ever occur to you? I go, maybe so, but did it ever occur to you that you were the worst of the whites? The point being, they do feel aggrieved and discriminated against. That's why I think it's important that white men, straight white men like you and I, are at the tip of the spear going out and talking about this, because we're going to be the most convincing people to the ones that are likely the biggest part of the problem, which is overwhelmingly white men. I wish it weren't the case, but it is.
I got to say, so much of this, everybody acts like it's fucking new, and it's not. No. Do you remember the movie Soul Man?
Yes.
Right. 1986, 87?
Maybe.
The idea when affirmative action kicked in really heavy, and it was the story of a dude who couldn't get into school, even though he had 1-to-1, he had, everybody at that school has straight A's or whatever, and he couldn't afford it. So he decides to go for one of the black scholarships and has to live as a black guy. And never mind, he looked like an Indian with a Jerry curl, which was always the big standout. And, and who wouldn't want to date Radon Chong? Let's be honest. But like that was enough of a gripe to become a pedestrian comedy in the mid 80s.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So none of this is different. Add on top of that decades of it. Lately the last, I don't know, 10 years of lawsuits by Asian people about Harvard admissions, and they're the ones being, kicked out on that part of it, and the extra ammo that was, put in through that fight.
Yep.
And you understand where they got it, whether they're experiencing it or not. You start to understand where they're getting it from. And that's also part of our media landscape. It's part of our the story we keep telling ourselves. Dude, if you watched American movies since, I don't know, fucking 78, you would think the CIA killed everyone. And not only the CIA, but the leader of the CIA against a rogue group inside the CIA of 5 people who are the only ones who can stop the guy who's killing everybody. So much of just that bullshit that gets thrown around is just it's hack at this point, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing is true of this kind of dopey exceptionalism amongst a swath of upper middle class white trash that are pissed that they're not getting a head start that they think they used to have. Which, by the way, they fucking didn't. They had dirt on their faces and black lung and shit like that for decades, if not a century and a half. So, but there's ideas like it's our turn, and then it wasn't because it's nobody's turn, in a system like this. But they feel like it should have been. They were promised this by a certain group.
They could still sit at they still weren't, suffering from racism. They were suffering from all kinds of deep poverty and addiction and so on, obviously. But I also think the other category of people who are claiming that they're discriminated against, we hear this all the time, is Christians. In America, Christians are being discriminated against, and the rest of us are saying, hey, listen, you have all the power. You have the court.
Right.
You have the executive branch, you have the legislative branch and the judicial branch.
Well,
you are in charge. That's why I always used to get so irked when people would call my show or argue with me. You don't care about Muslims. They're anti-gay, pushing people up. I'm like, listen, I'm against all the fundamental religion. I'm against all of it, but I'm most concerned and most against the one that has most of the power in my country. And that has forever been Christians, now more than ever. And they are taking rights. They've always been taking rights under the flag of Christianity. So the idea that they're more discriminated against, they get the 10 Commandments in school now, Hal. They are in charge. We're headed towards Gilead, not Berkeley.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that I would argue that in terms of the administration, they have a delivery system in the administration at best, but certainly not a true believer. Not that they need one, but this is classic, the town preacher becomes the mayor shit. Even though he's screwing all the widows in town and that kind of stuff. This is old fashioned boss hog bullshit. But I will say you're absolutely right. And my favorite part about
I disagree with
the Ten
that.
Commandments thing. My favorite thing about the Ten Commandments is that the First Amendment makes 5 of them unconstitutional immediately. So ultimately, if they want to have a conversation, that's the logical fallacy they're going to run into at some point. And also, honor thy father and thy mother isn't about praising your father and your mother. It's about not making them look bad by being an asshole. Live up to a standard they would be proud of. And that's one of the many things these assholes don't grasp. The other one is that Donald Trump is effectively a coveter in chief.
Yeah.
He is there's a reason why coveting, and I talk about this sometimes on the show, but coveting and envy are different. Envy is I want a car like that. Coveting is I want their car. And Trump is one of the most covetous, fucking disgusting people in the world. And that's, the fruit hangs off that tree. That's how maggots are. It isn't enough to build their own. There used to be this bootstrapper mentality around maggots, but now it's reclaiming territory like they're fucking Putin with Ukraine.
But while Trump himself has no beliefs other than in himself and grandizing all things. It was pretty telling. Every day we get an example of this, but it was crazy the other day when the reporter asked him how he's feeling after Charlie Kirk died. And he goes, pretty good. And then that night you saw him at Yankee Stadium doing the double jerk-off motion dance. But he said pretty good, and then pivoted
building about
to talking about
building my Epstein ballroom, building the Epstein ballroom,
which was crazy. But I do think it's important to say, while he's not an evangelical Christian and believes in nothing and probably doesn't believe that he's going to ever die, so many of the people that he has appointed in the highest – Pete Hegseth is a Secretary of Defense, and he comes from a crazy evangelical sect that doesn't believe women should vote. People should look up Doug Wilson out there in Moscow, Idaho. But also – the judges he's appointing, I think most important, we could go down the line in his cabinet secretaries and so on, but the judges he is appointing, which have such an effect on our lives and our culture, particularly in the Supreme Court, are what matters the most. And they believe in the craziest of all crazy Jesus, the worst Jesus ever, the whitest, most vindictive Jesus that you could possibly imagine, who doesn't even have abs.
Right. Yeah. Which is required, by the way, and a big scratch. Which, if you ever read, like Caesar's Messiah, there's an old great story about how they were planning on faking his survival on the thing of it. And so the spear had water in it. And that's why water came from the wound, because the little stunt they made didn't work. It was full of like pomegranate juice and stuff. And it like, shit. He broke my spear. Anyways, another tale for another time. I will say this, when it comes to Pete Hegseth's wife is like that. Pete Hegseth is a womanizing drunkard. Pete Hegseth is blazingly full of shit. And if you ever want a good time, watch the awkward exchanges between him and his wife when she was trying to help him get his shit together, drinking-wise and sexually, where they pray every morning before he goes off to work.
Why are you saying
that was
I'm not sure why you're
her
saying
idea.
I'm not sure why you're saying his wife is like that, because this is part of the tenet of that belief that men should.
I know, but right. And I believe there are true believers, and I believe there are bullshitters. And there is an element of, I think we can all agree that if, the Ayatollah is more than likely full of shit too, but if Putin wasn't a hedonist, if he was hyper religious and believed that his reward would come on the other side in Valhalla or fucking, on some sort of godly mountaintop for seizing land for his people like he was Genghis Khan, then we'd all have already had a nuclear war by now. But he's a hedonistic, self-involved prick at the expense of his own people. He steals their money, hides it someplace, because his idea of heaven is being physically alive on a yacht with inappropriately young women. That's Putin, right? And so the fact that he's a bullshitter, he doesn't go to fucking church. He doesn't go to the fucking, Russian Orthodox. It's all a show for the saps that do, because that's his view of them. And Hegseth's wife is all in. Hegseth, though, is a hedonist. He's just like fucking Hannity and all these other dipshits at Fox News who are in it for themselves. They don't think their reward is in heaven. He doesn't. His wife does. He does not.
I would argue that many of the leaders and preachers of this sect of evangelical Christianity are all
white. Absolutely.
It is part of their they don't call it hedonism. They speak out against it, but you better believe they practice it in any number of ways. I mean, not to mention just assaulting children
every slap and tickle. Right.
Every day you hear a story of another, quote, man of the cloth, some right-wing evangelical minister assaulting or raping a child, a young woman or man.
Right.
And it happens every day. So I think it's part of the inner workings of what they believe. They've convinced themselves that's the kingdom of heaven. They get anything that they want. And the man obviously is in charge. So the point is, there's so many of these people